2016 was a year of learning for me. It started off very well in January. I was invited by the Swedish Parliament to come and speak to them about honor-based violence. And it was really a shock and a surprise for me to learn that in Sweden there is a high number of cases of honor killings. And what is very difficult in Sweden is that the Swedish government is very politically correct, and these honor killings have been going on. There hasn't been mainstream media coverage of it. So a group of Kurdish women, actually very, very bright, activist, brave Kurdish women, decided that they wanted to have honor-based violence as one of the legalities of the legal system. They wanted it as a special heading under the legal system. So I went there to show them the Clarion documentary, Honor Diaries, in the Swedish Parliament, which was absolutely amazing. And then I spoke to them about the fact that honor-based violence exists in the West. It's growing in the West. It's not something that's just happening in Pakistan or, in South Asia. It's growing in the West, and we have to be cognizant. We have to acknowledge it. We have to speak about it. So, then I traveled to various other parts of the world. I went to the United Kingdom. The British House of Lords had invited me to come and speak to them about the Ontario experience of Sharia laws that at one point there was a push to have here, and to guide them on how to deal with the 100 Sharia councils that exist in UK. I met the victims of many of these issues. So I not only dealt with the principles and the legalities of these problems, but I also met the women who have been direct victims of Islamism, of political Islam, of Sharia-based laws. And it was really a wake-up call, because in the end, I'm a Canadian. And in the end, our purpose in doing the work that we do at Muslims Facing Tomorrow, with people like yourself and those of us who are activists, is to make sure that Canada remains safe, that Canada remains a pluralistic country, that in Canada we have the freedom of gender equality, that women are able to, excel in their rights, and that we don't let political correctness stop us from speaking about the problems. That is the main thrust of the work that I do. That unless we talk about the issues, we'll never find solutions. And you know this as well as I do. The work that I do doesn't mean that all the problems are going to be solved. But the work that I do is a drop in the ocean to make sure that at least we talk about them. Because once you stifle free speech, once you shut up conversation, once you start screaming Islamophobia anytime Islam or Muslims are criticized, then we go nowhere.
You are talking so important things and touching all important issues of today's complexities. And you just talked about Islamophobia. And in the guise of Islamophobia, what we see that there is kind of a call to shun diversity. So here in Canada, we are experiencing Islamophobia. It exists in the society, but we do not talk about the root causes of Islamophobia as well. Why this Islamophobia is?
Well, first of all, I have an issue with the term Islamophobia, because, Islamophobia, you may know if you go back and you look at the history of the word Islamophobia, it's a recent construct. There has always been racism and bigotry against specific communities. So, why this sudden Islamophobia? It was created after 9/11 by some Islamist organizations in the United States, and they specifically said that we want to throw this idea out of a victim ideology of Islamophobia so that we can stop conversation or any kind of questioning about what Muslims are doing. I'm a practicing observant Muslim, you know that. I love my faith, I have great respect for my faith, but I have a lot of difficulty with what Muslims are doing in the name of my faith. It's like I feel like they've stolen the spiritual message of Islam, and they have reproduced this political Islam, which is about violence and oppressing women and all the stuff that we see. 2016 was also a year in which we saw massive terrorist attacks globally, all over the world. We saw the rise of what I call the global jihad. And we have our political leaders and our religious leaders not acknowledging this. And this is what the term Islamophobia has done. It was created to stifle conversation. It was created to muzzle free speech. It was created to push back people who wanted to ask the right questions. Now, the way I look at it, I'm a Canadian citizen, you're a Canadian citizen. As a Canadian citizen, we have the right to question anything that affects the security and safety of this country that we call home. We have loyalty to this country. We want Canada to be safe. So if we see actions or words or organizations who are promoting the idea that it is okay to harm Canadians or to harm Canada, we have every right to question that. How does that become Islamophobia? And so this idea was thrown out there, and they've been very successful. This, by the way, is a multi-billion-dollar industry funded by the oil-rich kingdoms of, which countries I'm talking about. And they have succeeded in frightening non-Muslims from asking all the right questions. So here we are, and in the heart of the Western world, in North America, in Canada, attacks are taking place. But if people question the global jihad behind it, if people question that radical Islamist ideology is fueling this movement of terror against innocent people, they are called Islamophobes. So I agree with you, we must always target racism and bigotry. But as racism and bigotry, this idea of Islamophobia is to tell innocent audiences or our young people that somehow it's institutionalized Islamophobia. That couldn't be far away from the truth. Look at how Muslims flourish in North America. There is no other country in the world where I think Muslims have the kind of freedoms that they do in Canada. We have freedom of education, freedom of speech, gender equality. You can follow your faith everywhere you want. Try those same freedoms in Saudi Arabia. Try those same freedoms in Iran. But they don't shout Islamophobia there. In a country where women are not allowed to drive, where you can't leave the country without a male guardian, what happens to human rights? So I have no time to indulge in the hysterics that go behind this idea of Islamophobia. We must address the problem head on. We must acknowledge it. We must name it and shame it. And that is our philosophy in Muslims Facing Tomorrow and in the work that I do. If, as a women's rights activist, if we did not call honor-based violence what it is, if we didn't call honor killings what they are, we would never find the solution.
Absolutely. On the other hand, we see now the hysteria of Islamophobia is not confined to Islamist organizations only. Some Muslim Canadian member parliamentarians, they are putting motions to support the idea. How do you see that trend?
I think that is very concerning. I'm very worried about it, because this trend of somehow trying to pass a legislation that makes it illegal to criticize or speak out against Islam or Muslims is frightening, and it is totally against the concept of free speech. So I don't even see how this will get through, and if it does, I would be very concerned about it, because that is muzzling free speech, definitely. And so I think it goes in some ways, it goes against the Charter of Human Rights. It goes against the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which allows us freedom of speech. Any ideology is open for criticism. There is no ideology in this world, including Muslims or Islamist ideology, that is not open for criticism. Because that is the only way that you can move ahead. That is the only way we can bring about change. We must be able to reflect within and see where our weaknesses and strengths are. And of course, there are some wonderful strengths in Islam and within Muslims, and we must talk about that as well. What we need, Tahir, in my understanding and in my experience of 2016, is that I feel the world has gone to two extremes, the extreme right and the extreme left. And we need a balanced narrative. We need something that is balanced. We need something that is in between those two extremes, where we need to have the freedom to speak out, to critique, to bring about change, but we also need the freedom to have dialogue and discussion. And that is something sorely lacking. If you look around, you see, even in mainstream media, where are the discussions about terrorism and about radicalization and the root causes of radicalization and about the hate that is being taught through curriculums and about the hate that is being taught in places of worship and at a very young age? None of this should be made taboo. You know, this should be open for discussion so that you and I can create a better Canada for our children and grandchildren, because that is why we do the work that we do. You know, I'm at an age where I've lived most of my life, but I do this because I want a better world for my children and my grandchildren. And if we stop them from asking the right questions, we'll never have a better world.
Right.
You know, we have an alternate narrative. We have a different way of dealing with things. We are peace-loving, reform-minded Muslims who want to see peace in the world, who want to see Islam and Muslims come into the 21st century to embrace the values of a liberal democracy, of gender equality, of separation of church and state, to put the concept of armed jihad in the 7th century parking lot. And you know, that's one of the things that we have created, is the 7th century parking lot. We want to take some of the notions that are not valid today and park them there. You know, we are not Islamic scholars, so obviously we can't change that notion, but we can say, okay, let's park it in the 7th century parking lot for now. We don't need to implement it today, because we are living in nation states. We are not tribes anymore. We are not barbarians. We don't have to attack each other. So we have to find a way of getting around our differences without killing each other. I mean,
you were in Berlin.
Yes.
About a week before the terrorist attack happened on Christmas.
Yes,
holidays.
it's so sad that we were in Berlin for this Censored Women's Film Festival, and then we heard that this Berlin Christmas market is something that one must see. So we decided to go in the evening and do our Christmas shopping from the Berlin Christmas market, and I can't begin to tell you what a wonderful experience it was. I mean, you know, there are stalls of food and music and dancing. It was just wonderful. But there were so many people that the thought crosses your mind, because when you have dealt with looking at, you know, the mindset of the radicals, the thought crosses your mind, oh my God, I hope nothing happens here. A week later, at the same place, we were standing in front of the very church where this attack happened. At the same spot and at the same time this happened. And it is heartrending that human beings today can think of doing something like this and kill innocent men, women, and children in a place where they have gone to celebrate. And I feel very frustrated and very, you know, sometimes very sad that we are not able to deal with this problem head on. Why is it that we can't do that? You know, I'm not a political leader, so I don't have the answer. My job is to put the issue out in the open, to talk about it, to you know, create safe spaces where we can discuss this. And what is happening is that in 2016, there were so many terrorist attacks in the Western world that there is now a backlash. And we are the ones who are going to face that. Our children are the ones who are going to face that. And you can't blame the mainstream, because they're also fed up of this conversation. You know, an attack happens, and you have these political pundits, I call them, they come on TV, and they go on and on, was it mental sickness? Of course it's mental sickness when somebody kills innocent people. But, you know, they want to find, was this person disturbed as a child, and, you know, what sort of psychological illness they have. It's a global jihad, stupid. How many times do we have to say this over and over again? But now that is what the mantra has to be in 2017. It's a global jihad, stupid. And if people don't pick it up, then there is something wrong with them.